congratulations for having the inaugural conference in investments in real estate. This was a topic that was always interesting, but I'm so happy that you've actually pulled together so many different eminent personalities from the real estate industry to talk about this. And it's a day-long conference. And I'm sure end of the day, of course, everyone's going to be a bit tired, but everyone's going to go back with a lot of information, knowledge, and probably with an appetite to discuss more and more. So hopefully we'll have more of these coming in the years to come or months to come, maybe. It's absolutely a pleasure and delight for me to moderate this panel. It is a topic that's very relevant. PropTech is a topic that has been popular for many years, and India has been at the forefront of this discussion. They said that globally, India was in the top 3 when it came to PropTech investments. That was pre-COVID. I don't have the statistics in terms of how it's faring now, but we'll surely get a flavor of that in the next 45 minutes or so. But if you look at what really drove PropTech funding, it was really a bunch of people trying to solve real-world problems in real estate, and they were addressing the entire life cycle of real estate, all the way from site selection to construction to, let's say, seat booking systems in offices, to touchless technologies. And of course, with the pandemic, there are new use cases that have become so relevant, and they'll hopefully keep driving this topic and driving investments in PropTech. But what's interesting, and this is something that we're going to discuss about, is how has the current pandemic or the current situation impacted all this? Has it impacted the appetite of the investors? Do we need a different skill set for the ecosystem in the new world because we might be trying to solve different challenges? Are the new stakeholders that have come in that are expecting different problems to be solved? Will there be new contracting models or new delivery models that will be required in the new world? And many more. So I have, as I said earlier, the privilege of moderating this panel. The panelists have already been introduced, so I won't go through the names again. But it's very interesting that we have a mix of occupiers, developers, landlords, and of course, we've got 2 who actually run PropTech platforms. And they're solving problems that are so relevant. But these kind of platforms didn't exist in the past. So with that, I'm going to go straight into the discussions, and maybe I'll start with Varun, yourself. My first question would be related to the pandemic. In your opinion, Varun, has the current situation dampened the whole mood around PropTech in India, or has it accelerated the need for investments in PropTech?
Thanks, Mr. Sethi, for giving me the opportunity. So when we're talking about the pandemic and its effects on PropTech platform, I believe that it is a blessing in disguise, I would say, because people have got more inquisitive, more curious that how they can go for different type of category or assets or investments which otherwise was not available, or which people did not look otherwise, right? They were never looking for such PropTech platform. They were simply practicing orthodox investment opportunities. And as we all know, I will just relate it to one more thing in here when we're talking about pandemic. Just similarly, what happened in the time of in 2006, when payment gateways become of huge frenzy, right? Everybody who have not used his mobile phone ever was transacting even for buying and selling groceries, right? So the customer we're talking about, which is a very important part of a PropTech platform, the user behavior has been developed. The most difficult part of any industry, of any product, is user behavior. You cannot create a user behavior very easily. But lately, what we have seen due to pandemic and due to ongoing technology and digital platforms available, people have already been performing digital transactions. They were in other categories, e-commerce, like people were even buying their appliances, everything for their home. Now, when they have got the opportunity where they can participate or where they can invest into or make a whole transaction digitally sitting at the comfort of their home or office. Now that user behavior is actually transforming how the whole prop tech industry can work out. So pandemic, I would say it has its drawbacks, but for digital or prop tech platforms, I would just completely mention here that it has just accelerated the number of people coming on the platform, the number of people making digital transaction on the platform, and more innovation are coming up. So people are looking in this segment in terms of as an innovative product, not just orthodox real estate product.
And that's a very good point, Varun. And probably what you said applies to most sectors, right? Everyone says across different industries that because of pandemic, the adoption of technology has accelerated, and hence the use case becomes even easier to justify. So very valid point. Amit, I'm looking at you on my screen. Do you have a different perspective, or would you agree with what Varun said?
So I think, Sandeep, clearly what the pandemic did was, I think all of the ideas were already there, right? So it's not that anything, the technology-wise is new. But what it has done is it has brought all of it to the forefront, as you said. It has happened in all the sectors. I think what's really exciting now is that things in prop tech, the technologies that were on the fringes are now at the center. So, for example, this whole concept of hot desking, ability to book a seat on the fly, rostering, etc., it has existed for the last 20 years. Nobody used to use it, right? But today, if I look at it, every company wants to have this whole hub and spoke distributed model, and the reason it's possible is because of two parts. One, technology allows us to be connected from anywhere, right? It's thanks to Zoom and similar technologies, and also cloud, right? Because if there was no cloud, I couldn't be functional from anywhere. Second, the ability for people to be able to be operational, work from home, work near home, or work from their town. All of this is happening because companies have realized that technology allows them to do it. Second, if we look at real estate in general, I think it was only a lot of action happened about 6-7 years ago when a lot of these listing platforms got a lot of interest from investors. Reality is they were all discovery platforms. And that's the reason that, after a while, people lost a bit of interest in it. They might all still be doing okay. But today, that discovery is now turning into transaction, right? So through blockchain and some of the newer technologies, you could actually just sit at home and do the transaction, right? And some of that fast tracking is going to happen and will allow real estate to actually become at the forefront. The third piece, which is very, very interesting and related to blockchain again, is this whole ability of having fractional ownership. We see REITs as the first starting step. But the reality of the REIT ultimately is the ability for a person to put in a very small amount and own a large asset, right? Which is not possible till probably a few years back, even pre-pandemic, right? Today, everybody is forced because of funding issues, because of large assets, no monetization, liquidity available. Fractional ownership is something that is going to be real and is going to come to the forefront. So I think all of these areas are going to see a lot of action. And then obviously health, safety, hygiene, smart buildings, all of those I think were already there. It's just they are getting a bit more fast track due to the pandemic.
Thanks, Amit. You brought up some very good themes that truly have fast track after the pandemic or during the pandemic. And at the same time, they built compelling propositions for applications as well. So thanks for that. Renuka, I'm going to ask you the next question. You represent the occupier side of the business. What are you seeing from your lens?
Yeah, thanks, Sandeep, for inviting me to this esteemed panel and being part of this discussion. I would go with what Arun and Amit was talking about in terms of many things accelerated during the pandemic. As if there is no tomorrow, like everything was on a totally accelerated motion that we all went through. I would also add on to one thing in terms of if you look at years back, we spoke about technology did exist for, seating reservation and a lot of things, applications existed. But I think the key differentiator right now is, as we look at coming out from being in, like working remotely to a flexible model or to a hybrid model, efficiencies do matter. Because it's going to be quite clear that everyone is not going to come to office every day, or most of the corporates or companies would be looking at a flexible model. So how do we take this further in our journey? I think that would have a lot more attention. For example, if you had a lot of standalone apps on which that we were working on, we would have been working on. We had a seating application or a space navigator. We have a help desk. We have engineering systems running at the back end. But more important, as we look ahead and we look into the future, would be seeing that how do we integrate all of this? Because if we have to bring in efficiencies, if we have to bring in to see that, how do we get the optimal utilization of everything? Like there could be some of these business maybe coming 3 days a week to the office. How do we integrate that flexibility with the back-end operations, and how do we bring in efficiencies? That would have a completely different focus, or a more accelerated focus, as we look at bringing in flexibility, talking about future of work, and talking about what will be the need of tomorrow. I think this is what it is. This is one. And the second part I would add on to this is like, this has to run into operations. This has to run into people who are running the operations. This has to go its complete cycle. So the investment is not only in building the applications, or not only in building the platforms. The investment should also, it is a continuous journey. It's going to be an ongoing journey, and the investment has to happen in all its complete form. That means on reskilling as well, because there is no status quo to this. This is going to evolve. This is going to continue. And maybe if we had any transformation is complete when the last person in the chain can do it with utmost simplicity. And that means that the reskilling, the upskilling needs to happen through the chain. So I guess this would be the areas of focus as we look at future of work, as we look at building flexibility. We ourselves will be going through that journey.
And you bring up a very nice perspective, because we all agree that technology is important in real estate. We've been screaming out loud for the last many years. It's accelerated. But what you're saying is so important, that there'll be a lot of piecemeal solutions. We've got to bring it together. We've got to address the operational efficiency. We've got to address the skill sets. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to utilize or leverage the investments to gain efficiencies, right? For me, the classic example that comes to my head right now is Microsoft Excel. It's a great tool, but I personally just use it for plus minus functions, probably using 1% of its capabilities. And what you're saying, extrapolate that across a wider ecosystem of technology solutions addressing the entire life cycle of real estate. If you don't bring it all together with the right skill set, with the right analytics, with the right reports, etc., it'll just be to use that same analogy, as glorified Microsoft Excel as being underutilized. Thank you.
Yeah.
John, you run the incubator program at Brigade. What are you seeing? Are you seeing different type of pitches coming to you? Are you seeing more pitches? Just give us some context there, please.
In 2016, when we started the real estate accelerator program, everybody said, we are going to do something crazy because this category doesn't exist. Investors won't come in. Real estate developers have this, head in the sand kind of approach to technology. They don't trust startups. The big boys, the large established players, charge a hell of a lot of money for this. But we actually took a punt and said, nobody wears shoes here. What a great opportunity. And when we got in, you won't believe it, Sandeep, we had only 15 PropTech startups. The word PropTech was not coined in 2016. We were the first accelerator in Asia. There was only one other in New York. There were only 15 out of 180 applications. Only 15 applications came from the PropTech category. Today, in 5 years, we complete 5 years of existence on June 30th, 2021. We have in our database 2,500 startups solving all kinds of problems. And the pandemic has done a fantastic thing. It's put PropTech on steroids. I know today we are seeing, Forbes did an article in 2017 which categorized PropTech as collaborative economy, cusp of fintech and real tech, construction tech, and one. Today we know that legal tech, water management, sustainability, wellness, all this encapsulates PropTech. Somebody spoke of fractional ownership. We're seeing over and above REITs, we're seeing companies which are allowing end consumers to actually fractionally own 10 square feet in a large real estate space. So we're seeing a lot of development in this space. We're seeing a lot of young entrepreneurs give up cushy jobs and get into a segment which nobody wants to touch, because real estate as a segment, people didn't want to get technology in because they know that real estate does not pay. Even if they pay, they don't pay well. Getting to decision makers, because this is actually a very nascent industry, PropTech. And if you don't get to the decision maker in the industry, it's just going to go into its cycle into a black hole. So we're seeing robotics come into play. We're seeing fintech, some very interesting companies come into play. And Sandeep, you'd be shocked. I mean, the whole world today talks of co-working and co-living. In our current cohort, we selected 2 startups which do co-partying and co-renting on high street. And there are such brilliant young founders who are bringing in such diverse and very disruptive experience. I mean, imagine today with the pandemic, you've had hundreds of MSMEs, homeowners get into startups, delivering food. There's a company in Bangalore which just focuses on delivery of food for dogs. Now, she cannot have a place on high street. This startup actually gives you on MG Road, 1,000 square feet for just 2 days. And this startup is actually addressing the pain points of the commercial renter, but also the need of the end consumer. So there is a lot of disruption. We're seeing a lot in nanotechnology, alternate materials. So there is, I mean, it's a vast, unexplored. Like I said, it's such a nascent industry. There is so much. There's a young kid from Delhi who's actually created a huge platform, taking agri waste, which is creating pollution in the north of India, and actually created agri biopanels, which are cheaper than plywood, cheaper than MDF, cheaper than gypsum. And many companies today, the ICICI boardroom is using that material, and they're reducing carbon dioxide emission. So there is, I mean, we are seeing, because we're in the grassroots, we're seeing a hell of a lot of disruption in this space.
John, very good points, new use cases. But what I liked, what stuck in my head is this point you made on young entrepreneurs. We had a hackathon a year and a half, or maybe 2 years back, and I saw exactly what you just said, that the folks who had just graduated from college and they were getting into PropTech solutions, they knew nothing about real estate. And you would never see folks not coming from a real estate background getting into real estate, to start companies. It was never a startup channel of choice. That is a good indication of the excitement that is sort of happening in our industry, that's attracting people who don't know anything about real estate, but they want to get the nails and get the dirt under the nails and get into the group.
And so that's the interesting intersection here, because we bring in the domain knowledge. So we got brilliant engineers solving great problems, but the challenge is they're creating solutions and then go to find problems in real estate. We are, on the other hand, take those solutions, actually fit into a market need. So that intersection of brilliance in technology and domain is what we bring.
Yeah. Ariman, I'm going to ask you the same question. You run a platform that serves a need that's been existing for a long time, but wasn't served by PropTech. Do you think the current situation is going to help, or is it going to create some headwinds?
Thank you, Mr. Seri, for the question. So what is interesting is that usually, in times such as now, when there's an economic slowdown, uncertainty, or increasing inflationary pressures, what usually happens is that, investors gravitate towards hard assets. In fact, they prefer real estate, gold. So these commodities are usually a good hedge against inflation. Today's market scenario differs a little bit from a traditional sort of economic slowdown because of the work from home aspect. So that's a additional aspect that we haven't previously dealt with. So what is important is actually to understand, or at least communicate to the investors how this whole work from home situation is panning out. So work from home worked really well. In fact, it was quite tempting for the first few months. It was quite enjoyable working from home, but over time, what at least we've observed is that the work from home fatigue and the monotony has been catching up. So, in fact, our entire team, when we did a survey, all of them wanted to come back to work. A lot of our tenants are also coming back to office. So, this whole back to office movement, is something that is holding the fundamentals, in place. The ones which have been essential and, in fact, the core of the entire CRE growth story of the country. So real estate is a long-term asset. It's not an asset which you should invest into with a 1 or 2 year horizon. And like we've seen in other countries which have overcome the unfortunate pandemic and in fact have become mask-free, India in time will get there. So overall, I mean, PropTech has disrupted the sector and has been put in a spotlight because of the pandemic, because of the digital-first approach. But more importantly, rather than just providing a technological change, what it has also done, it has provided investors, essentially transparency. It's provided them an avenue to access this asset class, which platforms such as ourselves are focusing, on rebuilding trust, on rebuilding the transparency between the investor and the landlords. So overall, I do believe that the fundamentals of why CRE has done well is still intact and will continue to do well. It's just a matter of patience and waiting it out.
Very well articulated, Aryaman. So real estate was always appealing as an asset class, but investors usually got spooked because there was lack of transparency. It was very hard to participate in that whole investment process. But with REITs and fractional ownership, with technology platforms especially, that whole transparency comes in and becomes a big driver in that journey. So totally agree with you. Thank you. I'm going to ask you a slightly different question. And Amit, I'm going to start with you again. Well, not again. I started with Varun the last time. If you look through our, let's say our crystal balls 5 years ago, we would have made bets on certain technologies. Maybe some of them launched, did well, some of them maybe didn't survive. But let's look forward. What would be some of the technologies or applications that you think would be really relevant and hot in the new world?
So, Sandeep, I think clearly this whole idea of augmented reality and virtual reality has existed, right? If you ask any gamer, they would tell you how it completely has an immersive experience. But unfortunately, till a few years back or even pre-COVID, there was very marginal use of it, right? Today, almost every developer, commercial, residential, retail, is using that as a mechanism to drive sales, right? Now, sales are happening of apartments without people even, going into it. I think that technology is just waiting to zoom and completely have a immersive kind of an experience. I still believe that there is physicality that's going to be involved for sure. People are not going to make decisions on crores of investments just through a VR or a AR kind of a platform, but it will help down select to the 1 or 2 that finally people end up selecting. So I think there is going to be tremendous amount of growth in that area, and I'm extremely excited. We use some of it in our obviously sales mechanism. Second, I think this big data in real estate existed, but the use of that big data was limited to some sidelines, right? So clearly, from a big data standpoint, again, my point around blockchain, etc., they all existed, but they were not being really used at the core of it. And I think now that big data brings transparency, one, which has been there in the developed markets, obviously has been somewhat limited in the Indian market. Now, every developer understands that transparency is important, and a lot of companies in India and PropTech have done a tremendous job, without naming anybody here, in that space, right? So I think clearly that big data blockchain is going to completely transform how we transact, how we look at real estate, and how we look at the transparency aspect coming back into real estate. Third aspect, which I think is very, very exciting, is the whole element of artificial intelligence and machine learning, when it comes to planning, analysis, and delivery of the product, right? Today, I think a lot of the work that happens, every segment of that process, right, from the point when you envision a project to when you deliver it to a client, I think is extremely inefficient. And I think that's where I think a lot of this, the new technologies are going to have a tremendous impact that will fast track. So I think in the earlier session, the gentleman spoke about how some of these technologies are going to have an impact on delivering the solutions faster around 3D printing and so on. I think that is already started. I think we are going to see a lot of action in the construction technology coming back, which will fast track some of that decision making and also then the delivery mechanism. And then the final, I am biased, so I come from a co-working space. So I think the new age solutions that are more service oriented in real estate rather than just consolidation oriented or land consolidation to a building delivery mechanism. I think now it's going to be about service delivery in real estate, and we see that already happening with co-living, and co-working and many others getting a lot of traction. What I loved from John was the co-partying option. I would love to understand how that works, but more on that later, I'm sure, from John.
Thanks, Amit. You touched upon some good points. Renuka, I'm looking at you now. Your perspective on what's going to be hot 5 years from now.
5 years from now, okay. So most of the companies, as you look ahead, I think if I'm looking from a corporate or an organization's perspective, I think it's the ESG goals are coming up in a big way. Like how are we working towards long-term goals? Companies setting up net zero goals, and for all of this, as we look at anything to do with anything that we are doing right today is to do with the long-term goals the organizations have to set. And real estate, as we look at real estate, the difference is that real estate has to be long-term. When we get into premises and when we do setting up the infrastructure, everything, it is long-term. It's looking at the 10 years of the building. Same thing to do with technology. As we look at technology, I think the most important part would be to see that, when we start developing, look at a 2 to 3 years or more perspective and see that what would be the experience or the requirement that is required 3 years from now, and then work from there. That would be enhancing the way we work around it, because whatever we do current is just going outdated in the next run. Before even we complete it, it's just going outdated. So importance is to see that how are we able to think through in terms of having that futuristic from an employee experience perspective, from the back-end operations, integrating all of this. That the question that most of us are comfortable answering is to see that, what is it that you're looking out for? We are able to talk from what we have, what we are experiencing today, maybe a little ahead of that, but having that incremental leap and not having that fear of the unknowns and being able to walk that path. I think that is the key differentiator as we look ahead. As we look at latest technologies and digitization through IoT, highly efficient equipments, eco-friendly refrigerants, all of this will play an important part. But again, I'll come back to the same point of the transformation journey. All this is transformation. When we are developing or when we are setting up a new office, all this will come saying that, okay, these are new products. Would you want to take this? But my journey as a person who runs the entire operations part of it as well would be to see that, can we take it to the last person who really wants to run it, or is he going to say that there has to be a manual intervention and we cannot run it on technology? So that part of it, looking at the employee experience, looking at the experience of the team who is going to run it, and is technology going to meet those requirements? And can we invest on all of these, the complete investment, and also making sure that it's not going to stand still. It's not a one-time done investment. It is continuous, and having the plan for running this investment for a long term to meet our long-term goals. That's where I would say that my focus would be. Because
it's interesting, because in the past, occupiers typically went for funding or asked for funding to better manage the assets, physical assets, the equipment, let's say, or the facade, or the design of the building, or the operations of the building. But what you're saying is so interesting. You're saying technology will help make an impact from a long-term perspective on new set of stakeholders, employees, communities, planet, right? And I'm assuming, Renuka, and I'm going to just piggyback onto that, ask you another follow-up question. I'm assuming the business case is more compelling. So it's probably easier for you to go to your management and ask for funding because you're just speaking a completely different language compared to 5, 7, 8 years ago, right?
Yeah, so I think it would be important for us to have that long-term perspective, because if I'm doing something, even if I'm doing a refurbishment today, my question would still be long-term. My question would be like, I'm going to do this for the next 5 years or next 10 years. What are the things that we need to integrate as part of that investment right now? Some of it can be done now. Some of it, maybe it won't be. We may have to do it over a little, maybe an extended time. But the question is, do we have a plan? Are we willing to walk the journey, building that resilience to walk the journey, and then just going for it? Human experience is going to be a big part of our journey as we go ahead. And I think Amit covered it in terms of getting that hygiene part right. The employees, what would they be asking for? The operations team, what would they be asking for? What is it that we want to invest on? And as a company, where is it that we want to put the money? How do we build in efficiencies? The flexibility is so much when in a distributed work environment, work from anywhere, there's so much of flexibility that's going to come in, saying that how do we want to run our operations? And
in the past,
and then building that flexibility, and I would play a key role. And when we're talking about building the flexibility, it has to be making a full circle.
Interesting point. Real estate is now recognized as a key lever from a business productivity improvement perspective, from an employee engagement perspective, employee or talent attraction perspective. So clearly this is now moved from a very operational discussion to a boardroom discussion because you're addressing a larger cause. But you're right, you've got to have a long-term perspective. It's got to be part of a larger plan. So thanks for that, Renuka.
If I can add on one more point, that would be that, so if I'm externally looking at building the technology, I think I will also be looking at more flexibilities coming in. Every organization would have what is there with them, what is it that they want to look at, and what is it that they want to look at to buy or integrate with what they have, what they're looking out for, and how they want to integrate it. That would also mean that a lot of flexibility coming in from system integrators as well. Because I don't think no two projects will be the same.
Varun, I'm going to ask you to look through your future glass and tell us what you see, your crystal ball.
I was saying that the future of PropTech, as we say, it is just, in fact, PropTech term itself is just a half a decade old, right? It was coined in 2016, and I would like to share a fact here that I was there with Mr. Aaron and Mr. Zach, who are the ones, John must be knowing them, because in New York, during my time in New York, they were the person who actually coined the term PropTech. So that was the first time, and that is how I've seen the birth of PropTech. And when I'm talking about the future, I'm looking at a kid that is actually going to grow and contribute immensely to real estate. Let it be AI, for example, right? I have seen use cases of VR and augmented reality and gentrification. In India, we do not go for sales. We do not look out hot maps or gentrification maps, which are otherwise some of the use cases that are happening to develop. So there are certain, or I would say there are more possibilities that are going to come in the sector of PropTech. And as even if we are going into fractional ownership segment as one of, we also try to use or utilize these things. We look for some gentrification type. We look for, there is one company which is actually providing services which tells you which part of the building is used more using their sensor technology. And then they are providing that how the health of that particular area for the purpose of the users, the employees, can be improved, right? So these are different kind of PropTech, I would say, and day by day we will get to hear more and more new products new use case, and the future is definitely that PropTech is right now, I would say it's in the early year, and it's going to grow very beautiful, and it will give first thing that is in real estate, otherwise technology was never involved. We know that for the past 20 years, things have been in existence. But now, with the introduction of PropTech since 2016, I can tell you that the way I've seen it evolved in different countries, even in some developed economies like US, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Japan, I've been there. And I've seen how very small concept that is actually in the air but invisible is now being turned around by PropTech companies and giving advantage to all the stakeholders involved in the real estate segment. So PropTech is definitely going to stay, and the future is bright because it will not be anymore simply a development business, but yes, it is evolving as a whole package of services from day one when the foundation is laid to the next 10 years. And you have to give all the kind of services. All these will involve different use cases of PropTech, and that will be the future I am looking forward to.
Thanks, Varun. If I look at what Amit, Renuka, and Varun said, they covered actually use cases across all the three key stakeholders: investors, developers, and occupiers as well. John, you represent, in a way, all three. You're an investor through Brigade REAP, you're a developer, you're also an occupier because you use your own office spaces as well. Where do you see gaps in the current ecosystem? Is there an alignment between all three, or is there a gap that really needs to be addressed for this to move in the right direction at the right pace?
Deep, interesting question. You've been in real estate long enough to know that the real estate ecosystem is perhaps the most difficult set of people on the other side buying technology. But their motives are driven by just one thing: ROI. How much money can you save me? How much more money can you help me make? And that's one of the things that we insist with our startups. Don't give me fluff. Give me tangible savings in money or increased revenues. So we're seeing a lot of adoption. And, like I mentioned, the pandemic, you won't believe it. Earlier, before the pandemic, I used to go from association to association. Listen, can I get 10 of my startups to present to you? And in the past 3 years before the pandemic, we presented to 230 developers in totality. You won't believe it. In the last 6 months, my startups have presented to 2,800 developers. And these are not people that we are reaching out to. They are now reaching out to us on a day-to-day basis. Surprises, Sandeep, one of the largest real estate companies in the Middle East, the Aldar Group, which is co-owned by the government of Abu Dhabi, actually got the Brigade REAP team through a global tender to run a program to bring in the world's best startups to actually deliver value to the Aldar Group. So there is a crying need because Anurag mentioned about how the top 10 real estate developers market caps increasing, but the reality is that margins are getting squeezed. And if you juxtapose the reality that real estate is one of the most inefficient labor productive industry in the world, if technology can intervene there, and I love data, so I'll give you data points. The real estate industry in India only invests about 1.5% of their revenue into technology. The industry average is 3.8%. On the other hand, you have a challenge that labor productivity in the industry is the lowest, just behind gems and jewelry. And you have 3 huge tsunamis which had hit you before COVID: the GST, the RERA, and demonetization. You don't have a choice but to bridge this huge chasm using technology. And today, technology can deliver 40-50% operational savings, can deliver 10 to 12% capex savings, and deliver, somebody mentioned on ESG, Renuka mentioned on ESG. Developers in India, and we held a seminar earlier this year, We didn't know this, but do you know there are billions of dollars open for the taking by the real estate fraternity if they build sustainable buildings. There are two companies in India which have actually got $100 million to $300 million because they're accelerating their zero net carbon philosophy. So we see a huge uptake from the real estate industry, and there are three stakeholders, and this I'd like to point out. Everybody knows the two. They know the end consumer, that are the occupiers, the individual homeowners, and they know the captive guys, the real estate ecosystem, which is developers, contractors, architects, and engineers. But there's a third key stakeholder that we ignored for years, and that's the environment. Sandeep, do you know that for 1 degree increase in temperature, the corresponding HVAC operational cost goes up by 4%? In Bangalore, in 15 years, the mean temperature has risen 64%. Imagine the waste in energy that is being used because of our misdemeanor with respect to the real estate industry. 25 cities in India are going to run out of groundwater. Chennai, surrounded by ocean. Bangalore, parts of Bangalore completely driven by borewell water, by tanker water. That's going to create a huge impact on our own lifestyle.
You did very well as well. It's interesting how you brought in this new stakeholder. I'm going to use that one, John. The environment indeed is a stakeholder. And while there's a lot of consciousness, while there's a lot of awareness, clearly we're not doing enough. I was talking to another group of folks the other day, and we were talking about embodied carbon. You know, the emissions that we normally try and address through real estate, they are from operations of buildings. But there's about 25-30% of emissions that's coming from embodied carbon that we're not addressing. We're not changing the specs on cement and steel, etc. as an industry. And it's not just in India, that's worldwide. Although, interestingly, India is one of the most efficient in that whole green cement space. But I'm digressing here. Ariman, you obviously have a lot of investors coming to you on your platform. Are you seeing a disconnect between what they're expecting and what the developers are able to provide?
So I don't think that there is a disconnect. Yes, there's so I would say there's a limit on the A-grade supply or quality assets that meet all our criteria, because usually assets that are stable, properties that are A-grade in nature, a lot of the sellers or current owners are not very keen on liquidating them, and when they are keen on liquidating them, it's not at a very favorable price for the investors. So what we're actually seeing is because traditionally the A-grade properties have been owned majorly by funds, institutional investors, and these people are not very keen on liquidating, whereas the strata owners have not previously had an ability or an opportunity to invest in the institutional grade properties. So today, when we go out to acquire assets or find good properties for our investors, the challenge we face is that there are not enough individual owners who have access to these A-grade properties. So there is a slight problem with supply, but of recent, things have been changing. Interesting properties are coming onto the market. The pandemic has caused a churn. Different businesses had sort of different stress during the pandemic, and some of that has translated into these businesses requiring cash flow. So, unlike ever before, a lot of your institutional funds, they are putting out some interesting assets on the market, which we are making available to our investors. But yes, I think asset selection is, of utmost importance, especially when dealing with retail investors. And something interesting that we are in fact doing, to optimize that or optimize the value that we are providing is, so we are evaluating a lot of big data sets, using AI and machine learning, also with automation algorithms. So what we do is these algorithms essentially evaluate and identify a broad spectrum of variables, and run it across a multi-scenario probabilistic model. So what that does is it gives you insights, and it allows you to evaluate a much larger segment of properties that otherwise, through human processes would not have been viable. It would have required, a team size of, quite a few hundred people. So, traditionally, I think because of the data asymmetry, this angle hasn't, been sort of pursued, or it hasn't been applicable at large. But today, because data has become far more accessible and it's far more reliable, the integration of AI, ML, and things like that, will going forward help, with the asset selection process. It'll help distinguish the intrinsic value of properties as opposed to the market value. So, that's something which is very interesting. And that's essentially the thesis of what we are trying to build. Find properties that currently might be misvalued by the market, but there are underlying factors that could potentially give you a significant upside, basis the intrinsic fundamentals of that micro market and that asset. So integrating all these different technologies, it gives a very unique insight into the whole asset selection process. And another thing that we've done is, we're also increasingly observing is the integration of IoT. So what IoT does is, it bridges the gap between the digital world and the physical world. So a lot of your data, a lot of the data aggregation, sanitization, and in fact, accuracy has become a lot more reliable today. So a lot of these IoT solutions, what they've helped with is creating, sustainable and smart workplaces, reduce, energy consumption of buildings. But most importantly, and most interestingly, in fact, it's helped address the decision-making paradox. So a lot of the time, a lot of the delay, in real estate, or for that matter, in any segment, comes from the human decision-making paradox, which is, when there's a multiple options, by human nature, you're going to spend a lot of time evaluating between them. So IoT, AI, ML, a lot of these things help transition the decision-making process from a sort of subjective approach more to a quantifiable one. So we are trying to limit, you can say, human subjectivity and translate it more towards quantifiable thesis when we go and select an asset.
That's a very, very interesting approach. I'm just conscious of time. We probably have another 4 minutes left. And I'm just going to ask, think of it as a rapid fire round. I'm going to ask you all the same question because all of you in a way are associated with commercial real estate. So I'm going to focus my question on commercial real estate. A lot of the companies are struggling with getting employees back to the workplace. It's almost become a joke that the virus is only in the offices, and it's not in Goa, it's not in Maldives, it's not in movie halls and shopping malls as well. So what technology will make it easier for employers to encourage employees to come back to the offices quickly? Just make it a 30-second response, if you could, please. Amit, you want to start off, please?
So obviously, I'm personally vested for people to come back to work because my business hinges on it. So I think vaccination, right? I don't think it's technology per se, but vaccination coordinated with people's mind that the workplace, the building, and then the workplace that they're going to work in is safe, right? So anything that technology can do, which is obviously we are talking about the hygiene factors around how the processes are followed. Is there the vaccination certificate? Is that integrated with your building network so that I know who all are vaccinated in that workspace? Second is the ability for the process to follow so that the hygiene factors are completely delivered consistently. So if I walk into a facility and it shows me that this is the level of hygiene that's happening, it will help. The third is that I would be safe within my bubble. So how can I do that? By using technology to make my booking, know that Amit and Sandeep are together, we are in the bubble, so we are safe together. So all of these things which all exist, if they all come together, I think will bring people faster back to work.
Yeah, I think we should have a more long-term approach than just trying to just do it as a one-time solution. I do go with what Amit said, and as of now, it's important to make the employees, there would be at any time when you're looking at something new, there's always people who are early adopters, and there are people who love to wait and watch like how it's going to turn out, and then come into the second run and come in, and then there would be somebody who will be just waiting to see that, okay, if everything goes fine, then I'll come in. So there would be different curve that we will be working on. Most important is to see that as we look at solutions, whether it's seating reservation, utilization, creating that safety net, as well as in terms of building that hygiene factor and giving that comfort to employees. This has to be looked at more long term. And technology will definitely play a huge role over here in terms of how we can run it for getting employees back to office, but more once you get them back to employees, how do you sustain it and how do you take it further from there, and how do you give that comfort factor from where they start, because that's just the start of the journey. And it's long term, it has to go much way longer. So building the technology to take it long term is what I would say that we need to focus on.
Okay, thanks.
It doesn't stop with coming back to office.
Good point. We've just got another minute left. Does anyone, John, Ariman, Varun, do you have anything else to add?
Quickly add, there are two paradoxical mindsets. One is a mindset driven by fear, and the second is a mindset saying, listen, I need to get out of home and get back to work. And they are two sides of the same coin. So we are seeing, and we are now pushing the envelope on ensuring that workplaces, there is contactless access. People don't want to be touching elevator buttons. They don't want to be touching biometric finger scanners. That's one. Two, and this data will surprise you, the largest areas of contamination are washrooms and elevators. So we are now, and the third data point is that electromagnetic radiation in homes and buildings actually spread the virus much faster. So we are looking at technologies that are addressing contactless access. We have a company which is actually doing washroom management with odor sensor, people sensor, germ sensors. And we're also looking at a company which actually prevents and cocoons you through the risks of electromagnetic radiation. And these three, and the fourth, of course, is air quality index. Today, we have a startup which actually kills the virus at the entry point of air. So if you can provide in the mind of your employee or homeowner that my space is safe, then the probability of people coming back is much higher. In fact, my office is working full steam. Everybody comes into work. And like Renuka said, we sit at 10 feet distances, but our toilets are sanitized, we don't enter lifts, and we have completely contactless access points. And our air quality is controlled by a company that's mentored by us.
Excellent. Ariman, Varun, I'm sorry, we won't be able to get to your response, but I'm happy to connect with you offline if you have something additional to share. I'm going to wrap this up. Great session. I think we all agree that there are a lot of new use cases coming up. The opportunity to continue to invest, maybe fast track the investment in real estate is real and attractive. The data point that I learned was investment in real estate in our industry is around 1.8% of revenues, whereas other industries are at 3.8. So we could even double and still be less than other industry average. But it clearly will need to speed up. We are trying to address various outcomes, and all stakeholders are aligning with these outcomes, be it efficiency, transparency, safety, analytics, sustainability, etc. We also picked up new stakeholders that are coming into the discussion. Obviously, the employees or the end users in a mall, for example, residents in a residential complex, but also the environment. And more importantly, all the buzzwords that we hear, the tools like AI, machine learning, IoT, etc., they're all coming into play and making this whole PropTech space exciting, intelligent, and relevant as well. With that, I want to thank you all. Great discussion, and look forward to staying in touch. Be safe, and let's hope the employees come back quickly. With that, Sapna, back to you.
Well, that was a great session. We also have some questions, so I'll just take one question. One is they're asking how PropTech is changing the entire consumer journey with whatever verticals they are, whether it is financial transaction, whether it is design, whether it is construction, or maybe asset management. So probably from each of our speaker, how it is changing the consumer journey in various segments.
Look, I think, as Renuka also implied, that it's the consumer experience that's driving the whole principles of investing in PropTech. So the consumer is the newest stakeholder and is going to influence this whole discussion and the whole journey. So in the case of offices, the employee experience, and experience includes not just engagement or fulfillment or empowerment as we typically used to look at engagement experience, but also wellness, and that's physical and mental as well. So I think PropTech is going to drive this this point that you brought up in a very positive way in the right direction.
Okay, Amit, your views.
So I think I'll just use an example from how we look at it, right? So clearly our customers are the ultimate reason that we exist, and we have done a lot under the technology umbrella, be it our, the customer sat that we do on an ongoing basis to, customer first desk that allows us to be in touch with our customers. And a lot of that happens through a technology platform that basically ensures that we deliver better service to our customers. And I think that's going to get fast tracked, because as real estate converges into more of a service delivery kind of a platform, I think connection with the customers and ability to service them and respond to them faster is going to be at the core of everything. So I think we use that day in and day out. So I think that's going to have an impact for a larger audience as well.
That's right. Aravind, how do you see in financial segment?
Sure. So, we are essentially dealing with retail investors and providing them an avenue to invest into commercial real estate. What we observed is that a lot of these retail investors did not have the expertise, in themselves to conduct legal due diligence, technical evaluation, go end to end on the sort of data metrics. And fully understand the asset in itself. So what we are enabling them to do is, from the comfort of their home, from a click of a button, they can invest. We do all the heavy lifting for them. So we manage the property, we run the numbers, we do the legal. For them, it's as easy as investing into a equity stock. And the tech aspect comes into the fact that managing 160 investors or 200 investors per property, without tech is not feasible. So we've integrated a lot of automation. We've integrated a lot of, verification tools, onboarding tools, to make the end user or investor journey as seamless as possible, and essentially take away all the hassles of investing in the asset class.
Okay. Renuka, your last words. How do you see consumer journey changing with technology?
Yep, Sandeep covered it, but I'll just add on to a few points in terms of, as we look at creating experience, and the future is, it's moving into being more predictive. The solutions that are more predictive and more sustainable, focused on ESG goals, and having that, if we look at all of these, the most important part that we also need to realize is the journey, the journey that's going to be in front of us, which is going to be the culture of learning and being prepared for the unexpected.
Okay, fantastic.
As long as we can build the resilience to, to deal with the unexpected, and we have solutions which are sustainable, aligning to the net zero goals, ESG, I think that's what would look at as for investment. Yeah.
That's right. John, your quick words on that.
Sapna, we've seen a very interesting, in addition to what people have said on the show, we've seen a very interesting development. Customers today are environmentally conscious, and I'll give you tangible data points. There is a real estate developer here too, which has built a building that has been rated by LEED as the greenest building in Asia. He commands a 25% premium vis-a-vis properties of all large real estate developers in his region. So customers are now saying, boss, are you eco-friendly? Are you water sustainable? Are you, waste zero? So there is a huge move to consumers looking at buying or living in properties that are environmentally sustainable, in addition to wellness, transparency, efficiency, and stuff like that. So we're seeing this as a big move, which is why almost 25% of my startups are today in the sustainability space.
That's true. Sustainability is the keyword today, and wellness is associated with, it's part of sustainability. Varun, what do you have to say? How consumer journey is changing with technology?
Basically, the customers these days have been changing in way they interact, their behavior. And we as a fraction ownership platform, we have seen customers who never even have thought about owning an asset, a graded asset that housed a very good graded MNC as a tenant, and they could access, not just access, but actually own that building in terms of fractional ownership, where they can have this opportunity on the platform, and that too with the support of all, global professionals, right? Our team are global professionals. They come from all parts of the world, and they are the experts in their field. They know the transaction management, they know the tenant representation, they know how the building is upkept, what to see. There are tier 1 law firms that have been involved for due diligence, and we have used AI technology to onboarding the process of the customer. Like within 5 minutes, just you have to open your phone or open your laptop, and within the next 5 minutes you can just have the complete transaction using AI, using platform, using technology. So that's the customer experience that's looking for. And also the biggest part being transparency. Every single digit, every single number is available on the platform to the customer. So we believe that accessibility, transparency, and small ticket size has what turn a customer into a very good experience, and that is going to grow.
So that's wonderful. I think we had a very great session where we covered a lot of aspects, and one biggest factor that has come is technology has made the entire real estate transparent. It has democratized, real estate. It's now, we bottom of the pyramid can access technology, can access real estate, whatever ticket size they are looking at, and most importantly, sustainability and wellness through technology. And in fact, one of the segments, Sanjay, that said even the human experience through technology can be, integrated into it. So thank you so much, everyone, for bringing those varied viewpoints on this session. And we thank you for sharing your time and your views with our audience today. Thank you so much.